Hello, my name is Sloan. I want to tell you the story about my history about the Middle East. I'll try to summarize it. It's a bit long. I became interested in the culture and languages of the Middle East in the mid-1970s. I made 3 trips to Afghanistan in 1976, 1977, and 1978. Unfortunately, in the 3rd trip, I bought a car in Munich, Germany, drove it all the way to Afghanistan, and I was arrested there as a spy. I was put in jail. I escaped from jail. They caught me again. I managed to get released with the help of the American Embassy finally on September 3rd, 1978. Came across the border into Pakistan. I'd heard about from other prisoners in jail with me about a place called Chitral in northwest Pakistan. So I drove my car. I got my car back. I drove a Volkswagen Beetle all the way from Munich, Germany to Afghanistan. I got my car back, drove it up to Chitral. And within a period of only 4 days in Chitral, I was actually released from jail in Afghanistan September 3rd, 1978. I arrived in Chitral September 6, 1978. And 4 days later, I got married up there in Chitral because I learned to speak the Farsi and Pashto languages, and that helped me communicate with the local people. And somehow or another, I got married. Then the family, that wife didn't want me to take her to America, so I had to divorce her, and they picked out another one for me. I got married to the second wife. I brought her to America, got an immigration visa. She got a green card. She gave birth to a child in 1981. But then there were tremendous problems with her cousin, because part of the deal to get married to her was I had to bring her cousin to America with her. The cousin, his name was Aziz, caused tremendous problems every single day. I couldn't get rid of this guy. I just couldn't break loose her connection because she was the only person who could speak his language. They speak a rare language called Kowar, which is only spoken in Chitral. I could speak that language a little bit. Of course, he was fluent, being her cousin, and he was basically controlling her against me. And finally, I just couldn't tolerate the situation with this guy interfering now, especially since she'd given birth to a child. I had him arrested and deported back to Pakistan. And then there was still problems. She wanted to go back to Pakistan to visit her family. I gave her permission to go back. I even bought her airplane ticket to fly back to Pakistan, and then she went back and has never been seen since. She's totally disappeared and leaving me with the child, who's only 9 months old at the time. Then I started receiving threatening letters because the problem with her had been that some militant groups from Pakistan had heard about this case, and they were incensed that an American man went over and married a Pakistani woman. In America, we wouldn't care. Let's say, for example, you're from Italy, and if I went over and married an Italian girl, I'm sure you wouldn't get offended or upset, but they considered it to be a disgrace to their natural cultural that an American man went over and married a Pakistani woman. In fact, I think I'm the only American who's ever gone to Pakistan and married a Pakistani woman, because they really don't like it when Americans or other foreigners come there and marry their women. They want to keep women under their own control. So they made big publicity against me. They had newspaper articles, over 100 newspaper articles appeared in the newspapers in Pakistan about this in very derogatory terms about me. And they also put articles in the newspapers here in New York about how I'd bought her as a slave because I paid the normal dowry amount. And so anyway, when she went back to Pakistan to visit her family, went back to Chitral, she has never been seen since. She totally disappeared. That was 30 years ago. We're talking about 30 years ago. She went back in 1981. It's actually 35 years ago, although recently, in the last couple of months, people have seen her. So they know she's still alive. They don't know where she is. They're trying to contact her. Even her own family, her own brother, doesn't know where she is. Okay, so that's in summary. So what happened was, because I received threatening letters from these Pakistanis, they wanted to kidnap the child or demanding I hand over the child, threatening me, and so on and so forth. I hired a lady to be the babysitter in Madison Heights, Virginia. I hired a babysitter full-time to protect the child, because in case they came after me to get me and possibly to kill me, they would not be able to get the child. So I hid the child with this lady for 4 years. But then I suddenly realized that her husband had aspirations. He wanted the child for himself. So I had to come back to Virginia, take the child, and we went to various foreign countries, especially we went to Argentina, to Brazil, and we wound up in the United Arab Emirates. So meanwhile, on behalf of this lady who had been hired as a babysitter, she was involved with some lawyers in Madison Heights, Virginia, So they started bringing court cases against me and my mother. Now, the thing about my mother was she was a medical doctor, a child psychiatrist. My father was a lawyer. My name is Sloan. My last name is Sloan. My father's name was Leroy Sloan. He went around telling people, because Sloan is a famous name because of the Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute, mainly because of Alfred P. Sloan, who was the chairman of General Motors Corporation, who was the richest man in the world because he was a controlling stockholder of General Motors Corporation, which is the biggest company in the world, General Motors was. So my father used to tell people that when he died, that his father had left a trust, and with accumulated dividends and interest and everything like that, the trust had $50 million in it, and this trust would be available to his heirs when my father died. This was a total fabrication. There was no trust. There was no $50 million. There was nothing like that. It just is a coincidence that my name, Sloan, happens to be the same name as the name of the richest man in the world. But, we didn't have any money of their money. We had no connection with those people. We probably are very, very distant relatives, but we certainly don't have any of their money. But my father used to tell this story about his relationship with the Sloan family, the tycoon Sloan family, out from Detroit, and so finally, when my father died of a heart attack, suddenly the vultures moved in. All these people wanted to get the money that they thought they were going to get when my father died. Well, of course, there wasn't any money. As a matter of fact, I was the administrator of my father's estate, so if anybody had the money, it was me. But I know the amount he had. He had less than 200 shares of General Motors stock. He did not have $50 million in General Motors stock. So what they did was they served subpoenas on all the banks. They believed my father had a safe deposit box with all the documents about this $50 million trust in the box. So what they did was they served subpoenas on every bank in the Lynchburg area, especially First Fidelity Savings and Loan, which is where they believed my father had the account. And what actually my father had, because my father had 3 girlfriends. I must tell you frankly, my father was a womanizer. He had 3 girlfriends. I'm a little bit like that too, come to think of it. But anyway, so they served. So he used to go down with his girlfriends and have them wait outside while he went into the bank and counted his stock certificates. That's why they thought he had a lot of money. But in fact, my father did not have a safe deposit box at all. My mother had the safe deposit box. All the documents and stocks and everything that were in my mother's name, and my father just had the key to the box, and he had permission from my mother to use the box, but he did not have a safe deposit box. So when my father died, Pendleton and Gamble, who was a lawyer for this woman who claimed to have married my father on his deathbed, they served subpoenas on all the banks, including First Fidelity Savings and Loan, and they reported back, well, this man doesn't have a safe deposit box there. They didn't know the secret. I'm revealing the secret right now for the first time. I've never told anybody what the secret is. The secret was that my father did not have a box. It was my mother's box. That's why they couldn't get into the box. They kept on saying the bank is lying to them, or he may have vacated the box or whatever. But the point is that they sued on behalf of this woman. Her name is Alma Dawson. They filed lawsuits against me and my mother to get the $50 million, which in fact was imaginary. There was no money. So what they did was they chased it around the world, and then they also became the lawyers for this woman who had been the babysitter. So they both representing the babysitters who wanted custody of my daughter. The name of the law firm was Pendleton and Gamble. The first name of the law firm was Jano and Gamble. Jano then became appointed as a judge of the Amherst County Family Court, which is also Juvenile Domestic Relations Court. And then after Jano was appointed judge, then Gamble became a partner with a man named Don Pendleton. So these people were represented by Don Pendleton's firm, and then there was another lawyer named Frank Davidson. Frank Davidson's the third. Frank Davidson's father, Frank Davidson Jr., had been a tax attorney, and he was always fighting court cases against my father because my father represented the Internal Revenue Service. My father was a lawyer with the Internal Revenue Service, and the taxpayers were often hiring Frank Davidson Jr. to represent them in cases against the IRS, which was represented by my father. So basically, Frank Davidson and Pendleton and Gamble, they all ganged up, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to get me and my mother and my daughter. So they filed court cases, even though we were not in the country anymore. We had left the country in August of 1986. We left the country. We first went to Argentina for a chess tournament. By the way, you may know about me. I'm a recognized chess player. At that point, I was the coach and trainer for the 3 Polgar sisters who all became chess grandmasters. And I sponsored them. I paid for their ticket, as a matter of fact. I sponsored them for a trip to Argentina, to Rio Gallegos, Argentina, very bottom of Argentina, for the World Under-16 Championships, where Judith Polgar was playing for the World Under-16 Championship for girls, and Sofia Polgar was playing on the World Under-16 Championship for boys. As it turns out, because Judith made a terrible blunder in a winning position, she did not win the World Championship. And Sofia in her case, she actually got beaten by a better player named Akopian, who's now a grandmaster. So neither one of them won the World Championship, but they both made a run for it. And then after that, we went from there. We went to Brazil, and at that point, I became aware that they were trying to arrest us on return to America. They were going to try to arrest me and my mother and my daughter, who was with us, Shamema. And so we went first to Brazil, then went to Paraguay, Asunción in Paraguay, and we found a flight from Paraguay directly to Spain without crossing through Miami. And then we went to France, then we went to Hungary, and then finally we wound up in Dubai, where the 1986 World Chess Olympiad was there, and I got a trade license, and we lived in the United Arab Emirates for the next 4 years. During the next 4 years, all these people, the Roberts, the Alma Dawson, and my brother were all combined together, bringing court cases to try to force us to return. Of course, we were not going to return. We knew what cruel fate awaited my daughter and my mother if we ever did return. But finally, what they did was they hired professional kidnappers. It took them 4 years to do this, but they kidnapped my mother out of the Bangkok General Hospital in September 1990. And they were trying to kidnap my daughter too at the same time, but we escaped. We realized what they were doing. We escaped. We went up to the Golden Triangle area, which is on the very northern part of Thailand, on the border with Burma and Laos. And then we were able to cross the border. We found some people smugglers who were able to smuggle us across the border into Malaysia. We went back to the United Arab Emirates, but those people were chasing us the whole time because they were being paid a lot of money by these people who thought that basically the whole thing behind this was Judge Gamble and Judge Jano. Gamble was still a lawyer. He was not a judge yet. Jano was a judge, a family court judge. Of course, he had no authority over this case. No case had been filed before Judge Jano while we were in Virginia. The Roberts had filed a case before Judge Jano when we were already in Dubai. So there was clearly no jurisdiction for the Roberts to claim custody of my daughter. And then my brother had filed a lawsuit in December 1986 against his mother to try to force her to come back and getting a freeze on her bank accounts, trying to force her to return, but my mother wasn't willing to return. So they finally hired professional kidnappers by the name of Boon Chu, who's a lawyer in Thailand, and he was able to get my mother kidnapped out of the Bangkok General Hospital and put her on a flight to America they injected her with drugs, knockout drugs, so that she could not resist the flight. My daughter was actually in the hospital room, and they came in and injected my daughter with my mother with these flights. So she's a witness to this. She was there when this happened. I had gone out to UPS to mail some legal documents to the courts about this whole case, and I wasn't there at the moment this thing happened. But so anyway, we escaped with my 3 children across the border to Malaysia, got to United Arab Emirates, but then they had contacts in United Arab Emirates, and they were able to get my daughter kidnapped from there and brought back to Virginia. And of course, the airline should not have allowed my daughter to be boarded onto the airplane because she didn't have her parents with her, and those people had no right to take her. But anyway, they got her back in Virginia, and they immediately filed a court case to get custody of my daughter. Remember, these people are just hillbillies. They are not related to my daughter in any way. They just wanted my daughter for religious reasons. Mr. Charles Roberts wanted to teach my daughter about Jesus. So the courts are so corrupt that even though Judge Gamble was the lawyer against me. Remember, the case was filed by Judge Gamble, by the lawyer Michael Gamble, against me and my mother while he was a lawyer. He wasn't a judge yet. And he filed a case against me and my mother in Lynchburg Circuit Court. So you can look up and check the court doc. You can see he's the lawyer filing a case against me. Then he was appointed as a judge, and he became the judge on the same case that he was also a lawyer. Remember, he's the guy who was serving subpoenas on my father's bank accounts to try to get the $50 million from my father's trust that he believed my father had, which of course did not exist. So now he's both the judge and the lawyer on the same case. This is obviously illegal and a conflict of interest, but nevertheless, he got me convicted of attempted abduction, attempting to get my daughter back, which had been kidnapped by these people. And the other person involved in this whole scam was named Bill Petty, and they kept reporting that the Roberts had legal custody of my daughter. They told the State Department and people like that Roberts had legal, but it was not true. No court had ever awarded legal custody of my daughter to the Roberts or to anybody else other than me. There was no court case. There was no court proceeding. It was completely fake. When they kept on saying the Roberts had legal custody of my daughter, not true. Never happened. And the one person who was on my side was, by the way, the Amherst County Commonwealth Attorney, Ed Meeks. He said there is no jurisdiction for the Roberts to have custody of this child. The child wasn't living there. They're not the parents or relatives of the child. And what they had done is they appointed the Amherst County Department of Social Services as a stakeholder to hold the child until the custody was decided. In other words, and with the Amherst County Department of Social Services was going to appoint the Charles and Shelby Roberts as the foster parents of the child while the case was going. Well, that was completely illegal. I mean, it would never be happen. As a matter of fact, this is criminal because what Michael Gamble did, Lawrence Jano did, Bill Petty did, and Frank Davidson did was all criminal, all illegal. And then Frank Davidson got himself appointed as the guardian ad litem of my mother. Remember, Frank Davidson had filed a court case against my mother. The case was pending in court. The name of the case is Alma Dawson, who was represented by Frank Davidson, against Sam Sloan and Dr. Helen Marjorie Sloan, my mother. So he is a lawyer filing a case against me, and now he gets himself appointed by Judge Gamble. See, the same people. It's the same circuit of people. The same judge is also the lawyer. The same lawyer is also my mother's guardian ad litem. And my mother had been kidnapped and locked up in South Carolina by my brother, who was basically behind all these kidnappings. So all this is monstrous conspiracy, and all of it is to basis to get the $50 million, which they believed and probably still believe that I have. But by the way, I do not have the $50 million. Please, if you have the $50 million, if you know where the $50 million, please tell me so I can go get it. But I do not have this $50 million. This is a completely fabricated now. So now they were trying to sentence me to 15 years in prison, even though I hadn't done the slightest thing wrong, not the slightest minor little thing, nothing wrong on my part. They were trying to give me 15 years in prison, and in fact, I did serve 18 months, but not the 15 years. They were probably very upset. They were trying to make up all kinds of cases against me, trying to allege everything. I managed to get myself transferred out to California and put myself in a remote location where they couldn't find me. Because if they could have found me, they would have concocted something. They could have said I assaulted them or something like that, made up some story to get me locked up again. But anyway, so that's how I wound up in California. Eventually what happened, my daughter grew up. She was kidnapped by these people at age 8 in 1990. She grew up and spent 10 years, and as soon as she turned 18, first thing she did, she joined the United States Marines, and she went over and she learned how to shoot a gun and stuff like that. And she went over and became part of the United States Marines and served in the war in Iraq. So that's why I have a daughter who served 4 years in the Marines, including time and service in the war in Iraq. By the way, she had learned to speak Arabic during the 4 years we spent in the United Arab Emirates. She had gone to Arabic language school, and she learned to speak Arabic. And I imagine they probably made some use for her over in Iraq because of her knowledge of that language. Although she said that she's basically forgotten the language, but I'm sure she still remembers it because she spent 4 years speaking Arabic. So now getting back to the mother, all this time the mother of the child had disappeared. So now I've been been able to go back to Pakistan to try to locate the mother. We still have not actually established contact with the mother, but finally a person emerged who has spoken to her that the mother of my daughter Shamema has recently died, and the mother came up from Islamabad to attend the funeral. So people actually did see her, and she was alive. But what happened in the middle of that is one of her cousins contacted me through the internet, and I sponsored her for a student visa, so she was able to come over here to America, and she's attending college right now in America. And unfortunately, she made a little mistake. She got a little mixed up. She came here wanting to marry a Muslim. But what she did by mistake is she married a Mormon instead. Instead of marrying a Muslim, she married a Mormon because she didn't know the difference between a Muslim and a Mormon. So she married this Mormon, and now she's given birth to a child who is 4 months old now. And now I'm being asked to take care of this child. So that's sort of the latest development in this whole situation. I know it's a rather long story, and I've just given the outlines of the story, but the central point is that I married a woman in Pakistan. She gave birth to a child. She disappeared. Then I had to deal with a situation in Virginia where these corrupt judges, they thought they were going to get $50 million from my father, which did not exist, but they also wanted to get my daughter to teach her about Jesus because, of course, the mother of my daughter is Muslim, a devout religious Muslim. And then Jerry Falwell was involved because the lawyer representing these people against my daughter actually claimed to be representing my daughter was a woman named Lisa Schinkel, who was an employee of Jerry Falwell. So Jerry Falwell was behind this entire situation. As you know, Jerry Falwell is a big religious leader. Of course, I'm very glad to say he's dead now, but he's a big religious leader in Lynchburg, Virginia area, and his organization was behind this, and probably it was his organization that provided the huge amount of money. They obviously had to spend, according to various estimates, those people have spent over $100,000 doing all these kidnappings and lawyers and all these other things that they've been doing. And they spent $100,000 of their own money to get my daughter and to get my mother. And my mother was locked up until she died 12 years later in 1992. They never did squeeze the money out of her that they thought she had. And so that's sort of the end of the story.